just jumping right into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. What?
Hi.
Oh, are you trying to step away already?
No.
All right.
I'm back. I'm here.
All right.
I'm ready.
Yes. Hello, we're live. Welcome. This is live, hence the shenanigans. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian. I'm here with Allison, and this is Maintaining Frame number 182. Actually, I could have made this a cinema.
Yeah, probably.
We haven't done, because we are talking about media, but it's called Fantasy is Dead, How Women Killed It. And we're going to be reacting to another video by The Second Story, a YouTuber that talks about writing, because she is a writer.
But from a very normie perspective, I mean, honestly.
Yeah, she's not like, well, no, I think she just really cares about the craft of writing. And so,
yeah.
you know, it is definitely a normie perspective. But yeah, it's nice to be that ignorant that you can just No, I don't mean it as an insult. I mean, you know, like I miss the days of when I was ignorant in a way, you know.
But then you would be asking yourself, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Why is everything going to crap? And you wouldn't have a working theory, nor would you have been braced like myself. I was praying for the world in 2019. You know, like I hope everybody gets through this because it ain't gonna be fun. And then everything blew up in 2020. So you know, I think the benefit of our do we say it's cynicism?
I'm not cynical. I'm just saying
greater insight.
It's a tremendous burden. It's a tremendous burden.
It's a burden. Yes, our burdens are tremendous, heavy, substantial, dense. They're very they involve a lot of gravity, but at the very least, you know, it does. You know, nothing surprises us anymore. We got the spoilers. We downloaded the script before even the series was made. So there you go. Okay, so the title of this is a bit of a misnomer, and I will explain that forthwith.
Did you watch it?
Yes, well, I analyzed it. Like I went through, I got the summary, I read the transcript, most of the transcript. So she specifically talks about ye olden days when fiction was formulaic and fantasy, basically epic fantasy, was basically a young man defeats evil, right? And you know, that sold very well. But she's saying that the reason why we haven't had another Lord of the Rings is because of the rise of this formulaic kind of fantasy. And she points the finger at Del Rey. Del Rey? Was it Del Rey? Yeah, Del Rey.
Yeah.
Not Tor? Okay. Tor gets a pass with this. And she says that that's why we haven't had another.
Well, there's a few people she talks about. Yeah, Lester Del Rey and his wife that started the Del Rey publishing. And Lester Del Rey was primarily interested in chasing after the sort of mania that Tolkien made with his Lord of the Rings movie or books. Sorry, his Lord of the Rings books, and they wanted that, so he saw opportunities, and so they started publishing. I think we're sort of like saying her video for her, though. We should get into it. Let her speak for herself. And then add our thoughts after. But we're going to be looking at this video. It's called This Is Why We Never Got Another Lord of the Rings. It's talking about writing from the craft perspective with a little bit of history. And she gives her thoughts on that. And we'll give ours as well. Before we get into that, I guess you should do the things.
Okay, so if you would like to send us a message or give us a tip at any point throughout the show, tips are very appreciated. They help us continue to do this work, which we have done weekly or multiple times a week for now 12 years. 12 uninterrupted years of bringing attention to this particular analysis of why everything is going to crap. So if you'd like to continue to support that, feedthebadger.com/justthetip to send us a tip. Oh, wait. Let me disentangle that. Feedthebadger.com/justthetip to send us a tip and attach a message to that tip if you so wish. And you get a bit more space to elaborate upon your thoughts, what you disagree with us about, which many of you do, and that's fine. We accept it because we're about freedom of speech insofar as we have control over whether the freedom occurs. So, we can't really dictate over the actions of other people. But anyway, feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Disagreements, agreements, comments, things you want us to cover in the future, anything goes there. Those messages go directly to us. They stay in a place that we can identify and return to, unlike super chats that disappear periodically. And so that's the very best way for you to do that. And feedthebadger.com/support to support us for the month. We are doing our monthly fundraiser, and I believe we're still at $1,645 left, with a few hours left on the clock. It's unusual that it comes to the wire like this, but it's also been a difficult month for funding because we did our meetup, which I think was very successful. You see this is the meetup graphic. Perhaps you can see it, and I thought it was very successful. People said it was a little intense but fun. And, you got to talk to other people who are like-minded. Monique specifically said it was a relief to talk to people who were like-minded, to just get that pressure off. She is the director of Parental Alienation Canada, I believe. And also, shout out to Monique. She's may be able to do testimony at the National Coalition of Women, or National Organization of Women in Canada. Because they are actually opposing the latest shared custody initiative, as always, because, they assert that there is bias against women in family law. That's why we shouldn't erase the bias by having a presumption of shared custody. Go figure, huh? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so they're opposing that. Monique is trying to fight for it, and she's going to be doing some testimony at the committee about it, which is headed by the National Organization for Women in Canada. Actually leading, I think it's the National Women's Lawyers Association of Canada. If you can believe it. Like, that's like two conflicts of interest. People who directly feed off of divorce lawyers, and women who are currently enjoying bias for them in divorce proceedings. So there you go. Please support her. I believe they have a website. It's a little bit confusing, the stuff she sends me sometimes, so just take a look. Parental Alienation Canada, I believe, is what it is. And I'll give you more information. If you're in the Discord, the information should be in the Actions Opportunities channel. So, wow, what a tangent. I did want to bring attention to that. So, but
all right.
Yeah. Okay. Just cut it off. Cut it off before I go any further.
All right. Let's get into the video. I'm going to let it play a little bit of the intro. I do have some time codes. So, don't worry. We're not going to go through the whole thing. But, okay, here we go.
If you've been following me for any length of time, then by now you should know how I feel about formulas. Not to overstate things, but formulas in terms of their overall impact on literature, the book industry, and storytelling as a craft, and an art, destroy everything. But in this video, what I want to focus on in particular is the fantasy genre. I don't know if you know this, but fantasy as a literary genre with its section in the bookstore is actually pretty new. There are some of you who probably even remember a time before the fantasy genre. Not that fantasy literature and storytelling didn't exist before, it certainly did. And I'm not just talking about mythological tales and fairy stories, but fantastical, inventive, groundbreaking, epic fantasy. But what I'm saying is that fantasy as a type of story that people tell has always existed. Fantasy.
I'm just pausing it there. Yeah, so sort of setting it up. We're not talking about comics, although she does have an understanding that the problems with storytelling is not limited to fantasy. It's not limited to books. She knows that it's a problem in film, television, games, yes, even video games, comics, all of that. So
where did it come from?
She's pretty fair. What?
No, where did it come from? Yeah. Where did that wholesale destruction and smoking craters left behind? What are the footprints? What's the monsters? Like, you see these craters, gigantic monster footprints. I wonder what left those.
Yeah. That's something that she's not touching
Prepared.
on. I don't know if it's because she doesn't know it or because she refuses to see it that way. I know that a lot of people have blinders, but yes, it's true. So like there's this guy where she's going to get into. I'm going to jump ahead.
Oh, we do have a message from Xerinx, a member message.
Is it a super chat? What is it?
It's just in the chat. I think it's like a member.
Oh, it's a member. It's a member message. Yeah. Sometimes those are weird because they don't show up.
That's why we say
they haven't taken me out yet. As long as I can breathe, I can think. As long as I can think, I can create as poorly or nearly I can. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. So yeah, she's gonna be talking about Lester Del Rey, the publisher that was sort of like on the coattails of Tolkien to like make a buck, basically. And it gets kind of, this is the thing that it always bothers me when I see it, where something is just like, oh, there was suddenly greed, and that changes everything. I just think it's a little bit of an oversimplification, because if somebody was simply greedy, they would just do the thing that would make the most money, that would also attract the most people. So if you took greed and mixed it with, like, say, laziness, then yeah, maybe you have a problem. But that probably has more to do with the laziness than the greed, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, you could even look at it this way. Capitalism gives people what they want.
Yeah.
Late stage capitalism, I guess, tells people what they want, but that usually requires some government interference.
Yeah, which means it isn't actually capitalism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, or whatever they mean by capitalism, property rights, basically, which incidentally, even my dog understands property rights.
Oh yeah, my dog understands property rights too. What's his is his.
And fairness. You know, if you offer a treat and then snap it in half, he's like, "What? What's that?" I'm sorry, that's not fair exchange. You know, if you give him a full treat for a trick, and then the next time you give him half a treat, he's like, no, that's not equivalent exchange there. I deserve a full treat. They understand stuff like that. So they have the basics of a property system, a private property system. Most animals do, because it's something that's deeply instinctive. Fairness and ownership are something that are fundamental to a lot, like I think most mammals. Okay, so shall we continue?
Yeah, let's jump ahead.
So let's start where all discussions of the fantasy genre start. Lord of the Rings.
He's the father of all modern fantasy. Tolkien essentially created modern fantasy.
Wrong. Tolkien didn't create anything but a world and some stories that took place in it. The fantasy genre was not only not created by Tolkien, it had nothing at all to do with Tolkien. While the modern fantasy genre as we know it was being created, Tolkien was hanging out with his buddy C.S. Lewis in England, teaching classes, raising his kids, painting, and, doing Tolkien things like talking to trees or whatever. But Martin's opinion here is indicative of what is generally accepted to be true. That fantasy, as we know it today, is the product of J.R.R. Tolkien. But it's not. Have you ever stopped to wonder why we've never had another Tolkien? Another Lord of the Rings? Another universally captivating fantasy masterwork? It's been almost 100 years since The Lord of the Rings was initially published in England. And since that time, the fantasy genre has, for one thing, come into existence, but also has blossomed into a massive phenomenon all its own.
All right. So... no, I don't. Look, she's not insulting Tolkien.
No.
She's saying that because this is the thing. She gets into it a little bit later. What she's saying is that Tolkien didn't create the modern fantasy genre. He was just making fantasy without the intention of altering the future. It's the people who stood on his shoulders later that built what people call the modern fantasy genre, and they say that Tolkien did it. It was almost like the state of modern fantasy is the fault of Tolkien, is how it's usually put. But Tolkien didn't do that because what he did could not be replaced, or at least hasn't been yet. And that's what she's saying. Like, has there been anything? Have we had a Lord of the Rings since Lord of the Rings? And some people will say it's like, what is it? The Game of Thrones books. I don't know what the book series is called, but that's not it either. That will be forgotten. It's not going to have the lasting power of Lord of the Rings. It's already losing kind of like, its luster. And it's not just because of the TV adaptations. It's because it doesn't. Well, I don't want to get into it now, but I'm just saying, like, I'm trying to explain her position so that we're not uncharitable, because she's not shitting on Tolkien. She's not.
But she is contextualizing him. And she's right. Like there were other fantasy writers before Tolkien, and they were establishing tropes. So he codified in a way, and of course had a tremendous amount of original inspiration. And although
fairy tales are basically old fantasy stories.
Yeah,
right?
and there were other writers who were writing like fantasy in the form of like fairy tales, like Lewis Carroll. I think that's Alice in
Lewis
Wonderland.
Carroll, yeah. Alice.
Yeah, and there were others. I've read them. I forget the names. I'm really bad at names. But there were others who were doing these kinds of fantasy fairy tale adventure stories. And he kind of codified this epic fantasy tropes while inventing a lot of stuff. But there were the tropes that he pulled out from already existed. And you could argue that things like the Nibelung, I don't know how to pronounce that, or the opera, Wagner, I believe, The Ring. Let me just, I'm going to, okay, just give me a second. I will codify all of this and get all of the names correct.
Yeah, when Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, I don't think if you asked him, I don't think he would have said it's fantasy. He was trying to create an Anglo-centric myth.
Poet. Well, he was trying to create, an Anglo-centric, a myth for the UK, and he was drawing from Norse, Germanic, and Anglo-Saxon mythologies, and a lot of the stuff he was drawing from was Norse mythology specifically.
Mm-hmm.
You'll even a lot of the names comes directly from like the Poet Edda. Also Beowulf. And let's see, the Battle of Maldon. Okay. So Old English epic literature. And then okay, so where's the there was works with a Norse background, or Norse drawn from Norse mythology, because there was some stuff that he took from opera.
Yeah, he was taking from all over and he was bringing it together as one thing. But like that, well, again, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, but Norwegian in the chat says, Norwegian Black Templar said, Gandalf means staff elf in Old Norse. Yeah. So yeah, you can see, again, wasn't he like a language professor? And that was like, he used that to like create his own languages, because that's how detailed his worlds were. And I don't know if anybody else, maybe there are, I'm not throwing shade at any other writers, but I'm not sure that anyone else put as much dense detail into their world building as Tolkien did.
Yeah,
I read Silmarillion, and I basically walked away holding on to very
not worthy.
like it's too much to keep track of, You need like a cork board with a bunch of threads. So I know who's who, what's what. But he certainly did the work. So
okay, so Wagner was another one I think that inspired specifically opera, The Ring of the Nibelung. And I think that was another one that if you look at fantasy as sort of like a direct parallel of fairy tales and mythology, then those things were setting the foundation for it. But I think ultimately her point is that there were other authors working in this genre, establishing a lot of the tropes. Tolkien made his world, and it really was just sort of like I think the best story. I mean, it wasn't just the world building, because I'm sure a lot of other people were doing a lot of world building, or maybe they weren't doing it in the same way. Maybe they were drawing it much more directly from what preceded it, the fairy tales and the mythology. And they weren't really thinking about making this a living, or something that felt like a living, breathing world at war. And Tolkien did that. And then also the story that he set in this world was, sort of unmatched. But I think her overall point is that he is part of a continuity too.
Yeah.
And, and because of that, okay, well, let's let her
let's
give
her
point.
some more time to like lay it out. But I'm just saying she's not condemning or attacking Tolkien. She's basically like adding context to this claim that Martin is making, and other contemporaries have made.
All the fantasy works and mega works that get published every year, why has there never been one that was so unique, so genuine, so pure in terms of creativity that it became an overnight defining work of an entire civilization? And no,
but also it wasn't overnight.
She says that Game of Thrones does not count. But go ahead, Allison.
I will sort of agree with her with that. Tolkien wasn't an overnight success. It took time. Like it took time for him to achieve the success that he did, for things to permeate. And the people that he initially appealed to was part of that success. Because I'm pretty sure he initially appealed to basically students, college students.
Mm-hmm.
We can continue. I mean, I'm just doing my aggressive typing because I'm
all right. No, it's okay.
The first biggest issues I would like to point out is that as wonderful, and I mean wonderful, as Tolkien is, he didn't do anything that unusual. His books are absolutely magical. His world building is god tier. But at a certain point, you have to take a step back and look at it. At that point, you realize that Tolkien's work, while special and beloved and perfectly crafted, is not as special as I think we've come to understand, in the sense that it was never really intended to be one of a kind. The main thing that kind of tricks us into thinking his work is so one of a kind is that there has never been anything like him since. My question is, why is that?
But that being said, Tolkien did...
I have a few things to say. His success was not immediate. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that there was a strong suggestion that it was. His initial run of the Hobbits of 1,500 books did sell out, and it became a steady seller for the next couple decades. His Lord of the Rings sold modestly in the UK, about 1,500 sets by 1960. And apparently the breakthrough, like I was saying, was when there was an unauthorized paperback edition created, and the books became cheap enough to be purchased more widely. And it got into the college scene and the countercultural scene. And then these people were the ones that really drove the phenomenon that is Tolkien.
Yes,
and
he mentions that it blew up on college campuses to the point where it was like the thing to read, which it creates parallels to Harry Potter in that sense. I don't know if Harry Potter is going. We'll have to see if it like continues to remain like a massive phenomenon, but that's probably like the second biggest, or like another example of something that could have the same kind of like impact that Lord of the Rings had. But I think with Lord of the Rings, though, there's a timing to it, too. And this is something that when she says, because I was talking about this with Lindsay today, when she says, why hasn't there been one since? And, I'm inclined to agree. And I think the reason is because, honestly, the modern writers today live in such comfort, or at least the ones that are like out here publishing books, right? It's hard for them to draw from personal experience to write. And what I mean is, like, Tolkien was in World War I, and he was in the Somme, which was like the most brutal part of World War I, as far as I know, and he got out of there. And so like there's no way. And then you add on top of that he was like a devout Christian Anglican, and that he was involved with language, and he had his own family and his children, all of those factors. And there's no way that someone that's been through as much as he did couldn't write something amazing. Even if when he was asked by like journalists and interviewers, they'd be like, oh, is this an allegory for something? You're trying to say something? And he would be like, no, it's not allegorical. But like, there's no way that his personal experiences in the war and, you know, with everything else and his faith and everything did not in any way play a role, especially because he did come home after all of that. And I think that like people who have these experiences, when they apply them in their writing, they don't have to like do a self-insert, but like they're applying what they saw in their writing and they're good with language, you're going to get like something one of a kind, right? A one in a lifetime thing. And I think with J.K. Rowling, there are some parallels too, because if I remember correctly, and maybe I'm wrong, but wasn't J.K. Rowling like homeless at some point?
Yeah.
Or she had like a really hard life and then she wrote those books. So like, I think that's the thing. There's like something authentic that comes out of your writing based on your own life experience. And the timing of all of that with what Tolkien had put out there, plus what was happening in the world, even after World War I, you know, and we got World War II, and then we got like, you know, all these, all this other sort of like the Bolshevik revolution, etc. And the books feel timely because of everything that was happening, which is why I think it resonated with college campuses. Like those kids were, you know, there was like all of these 60s like revolution things were going on. The Cold War was going on. And so it all felt really relevant. It was almost like being creative and making fiction around that time period was almost like the perfect moment to have something come out, right? I think that's why I think that's one of the reasons why Tolkien's book, not to say that it's a complete, like that he's lucky that everything, like he happened to be writing that story at that time. But what I'm saying is that all of these factors probably came together to make it just the right time for a story like that to come along. And it's why I think the Marvel comics took off too, because again, it was the timing. It was like they were taking the furniture out of the studio and Stan Lee was about to lose everything. And his wife said, just make whatever you want. And he decided to write something that was like of the time. He made the Fantastic Four and it blew up. And in particular, it blew up on college campuses amongst the counterculture. And so it became a really big thing for that. And then like in the 70s, just last example, when we were at a time of economic disparities and everything was really bad, like it was after Vietnam and the American economy was in the toilet and everybody was poor, and Sylvester Stallone releases Rocky, which is exactly what the story that people needed at that moment. And around the same time, we got the Superman movie. So like when you look at the stuff that succeeded, it was always like at the right time, done by the right people, because it's what we needed. And I think that's also true with this. Anyway, that's all. Sorry.
I'm actually talking to Mike. We had a potential recording disaster, but I think that it's been resolved. We actually went through the King of the Hill for its woke elements, and then we looked at the ick list. And it was like a 2-hour project. And I was like, oh shit, I don't see it in the script. But then I like looked through and I finally found it. So I just told Mike, because Mike is like, where is it? Where is it, woman? And I'm like, no, I got it. I did. I didn't screw up. So sorry, that was what I was dealing with. Most likely I agreed with everything you said, Brian. No problem. Okay.
I was just saying, I think it's just like that. I think that's what it is. But this is why I think that Martin's books are, well, we're going to get into that because she does talk about Martin. But let's go back a teeny bit. Here we go.
Being said, Tolkien did certain things that are different than what I would do.
I don't know about you, but I find all this incredibly tedious.
Let's look at these headlines, because you didn't read this because you looked at the transcript, but this is like what the issue is, so you have like a bunch of like more modern authors, or at least post Tolkien authors, and they're all kind of like comparing themselves to Tolkien. Now this, again, I don't think this is Tolkien's doing. I think this is like the industry reacting to Tolkien's work, and then you have other authors reacting to the industry through Tolkien, like, oh, well, I'm not like him, I'm doing something different, right? So Terry Pratchett, takes swipe at Tolkien as he wins his first award. Okay. Again, if you like Discworld, I get it. Like they're clever books, but this is just like the dynamic that's at play here. Okay.
Yes. Oh.
This is Philip Pullman. I don't know what he wrote, but I guess he's an author. Tolkien is thin stuff.
I'm going to be the anti-Tolkien.
Michael Moorcock, I think he's the guy who wrote Elric.
Yeah.
Says, I think Tolkien was a crypto-fascist. Just what we needed to hear. Michael Moorcock revolutionized science fiction with symbolism.
Is a massive self-insert, dude.
What, Elric?
Yeah. I think that your eternal champion is like just a series of self-inserts. Okay.
Wow.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I never read Elric, but I remember my kind of like edgy high school friends were like really into him. And I was like, looks a little try hard to me. Like, I don't know. But if you guys have read Elric or any of those books, let me know what, am I completely off the mark or what? So Pullman wrote The Golden Compass. I see. Yes, Tolkien was a war veteran. I know that. I think that means something. Like Tom Clancy, wasn't he also like a veteran too, or in the Secret Service or something? And that's why his books are really popular. Like, I guess he brings something authentic to the storytelling because he has personal experience. So, Trickster Knott says, and lost respect for Moorcock. Yeah. Okay, I got a super chow. I know, as soon as you start saying so-and-so is a crypto-fascist, that's like, oh, I'm checked out. Zaring says, for 5, it could be comfort dulling us that's made it so there's no other author on Tolkien's level. It could be the Prussian school system destroys childhood creativity. There's also walls put up with the idea of protecting children, therefore prolonging adolescence. See how so many come up with ideas to gate various things because the mind fully forms around 25 years old. Though college graduate students read essays written by 15-year-olds. The last bit comes from former New York City teacher John Taylor Gatto. We reduce the world around children, create isolation, and somehow we're surprised with what's currently happening. Weird. Yes, that's what I'm saying when I said I think it's because we have it. It's too safe. Our world is too safe. As weird as that sounds, I know people are thinking we're still kind of in a PTSD state from the last probably like 7 years, but I think that's true. So, all right. Anyway. Do you want me to play some more, or do you have something to add?
Oh, I think I triggered someone in the special chat. Hayden's like, this is a bad take, probably referring to the title. Fantasy is dead, how women killed it. Because I can name a dozen high quality authors making male focused fantasy without trying. Nobody is gatekeeping Mazlan or Red Rising or Sun Eater. They also didn't start in the last 5 years. They're massive and talked about nonstop for the very reasons you were saying are dead. Okay. You don't like that, do you? That I said that fantasy is dead and I'm blaming women for it. You don't like that.
Yeah.
You don't like it. Okay, let's keep going.
All right, let's keep going.
And then, I'm going to be the anti.
The grimdark genre and why I hate it. So the grimdark, okay.
George R.R. Martin.
Hope punk. This is something I saw this term. Hope punk. Did you guys hear? It's a new genre of writing, conceived of as the opposite of grimdark. Works in the hope punk subgenre have characters fighting for positive change, radical kindness, and communal responses to challenges. So they're good guys. So this is like the way we've been telling stories forever, and it's back. It's hope punk. I like how they're always rebranding things as something new that's obviously not new. Wait, I got this great idea. We're gonna have heroes that are good. and they're going to fight for what's right, and they're going to work hard through all kinds of tribulations, no matter what, but they're going to come out on top in the end. What do you think? Oh my God, I've never heard of this before. Hope punk. It's so silly.
I don't know, guys. Maybe you could just write your damn story. The main thing to look at here is that Martin, like most or all modern fantasy writers, has defined himself in part by how different he is from what he sees as the legacy of J.R.R. Tolkien. That right there is a pretty decent encapsulation of the current fantasy publishing industry. It is a bottomless salad of tropes and formulas, and then subverted tropes and counter formulas, with nothing unique or original, or even just purely the creation of its author. But how did we get here? How did we arrive in a world where people proudly refer to Game of Thrones as the American Lord of the Rings? Something that seriously concerns me. In a way, however...
Yeah, no way. I never liked Game of Thrones. I tried to watch the first episode.
Yeah,
I had to watch the first season, and I was just not interested. I just didn't like anyone in it. And I was like, yeah, I don't have anybody to root for. I'm not watching this. And people were like, oh man, it's so different though. So yeah, that's probably why it's bad. So I don't know. Well, what were you going to say?
I originally watched like an episode in, I think, the first season with my father. And I was like, this is the most boring stuff I've ever watched. And then I never watched anything further. Now, but then I ended up, for the sake of integrity, watching all the seasons, all of them. And I can definitively say that it is not my cup of tea, that I enjoyed very little of it. However, I can recognize that Martin is good at subversion. He's good at creating very memorable characters with interesting dialogue that nevertheless are quite nasty. And there was a few moments where there was like a few subplots that I thought were entertaining. Unlike most people, I couldn't stand Ned Stark. I think that's one of the big things that makes me different than the detractors. And the reason why, I'm totally 100% in the Robert. I am a Robert stan. I think Robert was misunderstood. He knew what was up. He knew what to focus on. He was totally fucked by being married to brother screwer and generally unpleasant human being Cersei. And the big tragedy of their first season wasn't Ned's death. It was Robert's. And again, what really aggravated me about it was Robert was 100% right about Daenerys. She had to be neutralized. She was basically a nuclear threat walking around, and Ned was like, that's a little girl. I'm like, what? What? What are you? She's raising an army, you moron! And Robert correctly identified that was a huge threat, and it needed to be neutralized. And what did everybody do? Oh, Robert's the bad guy. Neil's the good guy, or Ned's the good guy. Ned was a damn hypocrite. And he didn't know what the hell he was doing. There's a difference between being good and being stupid. All right. I know a lot of people like Ned. So
that's fine.
So yeah, even the people who don't like the show liked Ned. So, and they ended the show because Ned died. And I was like, no, I always got the feeling that Ned was a pretense or sort of like a construction, as if, this is going to be a subversion. Like the good guy's supposed to win and make it. No. And I always never trusted Ned because of that. Maybe it's just not necessarily on the level of the character Ned, just the written quality Ned. But anyway, there's my game.
Is trying to be subversive, but you can make predictions based on your understanding of what, like, you're be able to predict the subversive nature. Does it fail at being subversive then? Because I said when I watched the first season and people were like talking about how, oh my God, anybody could die at any time. You just don't know. And I said, you know who I think's going to live to the end? And they were like, who? And I was like, the dwarf is going to live to the end. And they were like, well, how do you know? I was like, because I can tell that Martin likes this character because he has all the best lines. And he was like an immediate favorite because he always knew what to say. and he's also the least likely to survive just based on the fact that he's this little tiny, like not even like a magical dwarf, just like a short person, you know? And he did. He lived to the end. And I was like, I told you. Like, it's always like, well, what? Oh, and who did they make king? The crippled guy, the kid that got crippled in the beginning of the show. He was the one who ends up. I don't know if that's the way the book is supposed to end, but
probably,
you know. And Jon Snow was not going to become, even though like he was completely set up to like, you know, become like the guy. And I was like, no, it's not going to be him. They want us to think that, but we know that he's being subversive. So because we know that he's being subversive, then this is impossible. So like what I'm saying is that this becomes, and that's what she's saying too. So you don't like a formula of storytelling, like, and we're in this case talking about fantasy storytelling, right? Which because it comes out of or is inspired by Tolkien's setup, and they create a formula of fantasy storytelling. And there are things that you know, these publishers, Del Rey, the book publishers, are expecting everyone has to follow because they want the same success that Lord of the Rings had. And then you get like people who are like, well, I'm going to do the opposite of that. And so they do is they invert everything and they do the reverse, but that just becomes its own formula. So you can just predict things because now you know they're working with an opposite world, in Bizarro world, and you can just make predictions based on that. And then it's almost like, well, then what's the purpose of subversion if you can predict it? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying you can't use it. I just think that it's not done well a lot of the time. So, anyway.
Let's watch some more. I mean, I was going to say that I don't think that Sun Rising or Sun Eater is comparable to Lord of the Rings in this manner, but I guess it did pretty well. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay.
It was published in 2018.
The
other Sun Eater, yeah, the other suggestions in that list were published in 1999. Mazlan was started in 1999, and the other one was started in 2014, which had very different publishing environments than today. So if we would even argue that 2018 was a very different publishing environment, but let's continue.
All right.
I almost can't even blame Martin. After all, he is the inheritor of a genre that was killed in the crib. Fantasy, as a literary genre, never had a chance. The road that Tolkien opened up for writers and publishers with the mega popularity of The Lord of the Rings was then paved not by writers and publishers eager to explore this new literary concept, but by an opportunistic salesman who looked at The Lord of the Rings' growing popularity and saw only dollar signs. I'm talking about Lester Del Rey. This is the man who made fantasy into a serious and marketable literary genre, and who also killed fantasy before it ever even had a chance to come into its own. Let's back up a little bit to 1950.
Oof, bold words.
Huh? Yeah.
Bold words.
Well, I think she makes a good case though.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the paperbacks you mentioned the paperbacks that blew up Lord of the Rings. And made it into a gigantic phenomenon, probably because it was affordable to young people. So yeah, let's keep going.
Volume of Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, was published in hardcover in America, followed quickly by the rest of the trilogy. I don't know if you know this, but when this happened, it was a massive cultural phenomenon. Newspapers were comparing the fanatical popularity of Tolkien's masterpiece to Beatlemania, especially on campuses where the book had become the novel of choice for youth in general, supplanting even The Catcher in the Rye. America was experiencing major cultural unrest that would change Western civilization forever. JFK had just been assassinated. America was entering the war in Vietnam. Rock music was gaining ground and evolving. Racial issues were consuming the news. Morals were shifting. The sexual revolution was shifting into high gear. The cultural landscape of America was changing seismically. Now, throw into that mess this deceptively simple and incredible book. A story that resonated with almost everyone across almost all demographics. Even if you weren't there, you can still imagine how this cosmically perfect timing resulted in something that hadn't ever happened, at least not in America, and not recently. The Lord of the Rings affected everything culturally. And by culturally, I mean mainly the arts. Elves and orcs and dark lords were suddenly everywhere. That was, in the earliest days of this phenomenon, due exclusively to the immense popularity of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Just to give you an idea of how huge this book was, imagine Harry Potter and Game of Thrones rolled into one and dominating like 2 entire decades. This, that is the mid-1960s, was also the time when publishing in America was drastically changing. Publishing houses had previously been companies owned by their founders or their founders' heirs.
I'm gonna just jump ahead a little bit because she just talks about how there was bookstores and stuff like that. So and then she goes into the Del Reys. I don't know if that's super important. Essentially, she's saying that the Del Reys that would be I'm sorry, I gotta find his name again. That would be Lester Del Rey and his wife. Judy Lynn Del Rey started their what is it, a publishing house, Del Rey Books, and the husband focused on fantasy and the wife focused on science fiction, and they were kind of gatekeepers as well. So they were kind of like saying that this is how your books have to be, like organized, because the claim is that they wanted to get that same success that Lord of the Rings had, and so they were trying to copy the sort of like elements, or like they were trying to like sort of reverse engineer Tolkien's books and say, oh, here's what he had in his books, and we're going to put these elements in our books. And it was kind of like you could say the I don't want to call it the monomyth, because it wasn't quite the hero's journey, but they were just looking at the steps, because the monomyth is older. That goes way back to like, knights fighting dragons, medieval stories of heroism and stuff, but it's something like that. So I want to get to, let's see, maybe it's right here where they talk about the Del Reys.
Locked into Frodo Lives fever, Random House, under the control of RCA, acquired Ballantine Books. At that time, the senior editor at Ballantine Books was this woman, Judy Lynn Del Rey, the fourth wife of Lester Del Rey. Now, in the future, after the establishment of the Del Rey imprint and the establishment of the Del Rey's control over speculative fiction in America, Judy Lynn Del Rey would mainly be seen as the science fiction side of things, while her husband Lester was fantasy. It's worth noting
they were editors. That's what they were. They were editors. So, and Slate credits him as the man who invented fantasy. I mean, in a way, because they basically created the category. But obviously, like when Lord of the Rings came out, people didn't call it a fantasy book. They just called it Lord of the Rings. So the genre that, with the way we see it, the umbrella called fantasy, I think it was created by this guy. He was basically mass producing, cranking out edited books that followed that formula. That's what she means when she says that, this guy killed fantasy, but then the other woman killed science fiction. And by the way, I talked about science fiction with I can't remember his name, Jay Ishiro. It was on my channel, and Kat Rocha, and they wrote a book called Booze of Steel. But I also talked to them about the printing, and they were talking about how there were, I think it was like 4 science fiction authors that were essentially gatekeeping all of science fiction and basically making it to where all books had to follow a certain formula. Like they were, I guess, they were engaging in kind of gatekeeping. Isaac Asimov and a couple of other guys. So that was also a problem in science fiction as well. It was almost like there was control over the way stories have to be told and limiting their potential. It doesn't mean that there weren't any good books, obviously, but they had to work within a certain boundaries. So, all right. Anyway.
However, that both were equally important in the destruction of American speculative fiction. Something that has always bothered me about the Del Reys and their undeniable impact on genre publishing in America is that this is almost always presented as a good thing. Judy Lynn is said to have revolutionized the fantasy genre, and Lester is even sometimes called the creator of the fantasy genre. In a sense, all of that is true, but none of it is good. Just about the only good thing Judy Lynn might have done for genre fiction was to acquire the rights for Star Wars novels before Star Wars had even been released. Nevertheless, even this good deed comes with a caveat. Having established Star Wars as the money-printing machine at Ballantine, she ensured that the science fiction genre going forward was modeled on that formula, just like Lester and Lord of the Rings. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Prior to the Judy Lynn era at Ballantine, Betty Ballantine had attempted to capitalize on the popularity of Lord of the Rings. As you probably know, when Lord of the Rings was published in America, it was Ballantine who had secured the rights to do so. So already they were...
Holy shit, 95 cents for that book. Is that crazy? 95 cents for that Lord of the Rings paperback.
Printing money. But hoping to turn a single book into an industry, Betty and her husband started the adult fantasy line at Ballantine and hired Lynn Carter to be the editor. Over the next several years, they attempted to reproduce the Tolkien lightning strike by bringing other, older fantasy works of possibly equal quality into the public's view. Works such as Mervyn Peake's Gormenghast trilogy, G.K. Chesterton's The Man Who Was Thursday.
All right, I don't know if you've read any of those, but they are going to show off some more books.
Yeah. I've read some of Gormenghast. I actually enjoyed it, but I just sort of wandered away from it because I was doing other things at the time.
Yeah.
It's definitely different. It's much more insular. Lots of interesting character studies. It's a little more eccentric, shall we say. So
The Man Who Was Thursday?
No, Gormenghast.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And Lord Dunsany's The King of Elfland's Daughter. But these efforts were largely unsuccessful. In fact, the Ballantine adult fantasy imprint had been more or less abandoned by the time Judy Lynn took over. But who were these Del Reys? Lester Del Rey, who often liked to claim that this was his full name, was born Leonard Knapp in Minnesota in 1915. He had written prolifically in sci-fi pulp magazines with a teenage target audience. In the 40s, he became an editor and continued in that work for almost 30 years. Judy Lynn had also been an editor, also for science fiction magazines, and had gradually worked her way up the ladder until Betty Ballantine named her as her successor. Thus, in the early 1970s, when America was still in the heat of Tolkien fever, Judy Lynn Del Rey became the senior editor for Ballantine Books. And while she worked to revitalize the publisher's science fiction line, she brought in her husband Lester to address the neglected husk that was the fantasy line. It was 1974, and things were about to change forever. That year, a manuscript made it to Judy Lynn's desk, but seeing as it was fantasy and not her usual science fiction, she gave it to her husband Lester. This manuscript, Terry Brooks' The Sword of Shannara.
Anybody ever read The Sword of Shannara?
Yeah, I think I did.
I have not. No. Okay, let's keep going.
Anyone who's even loosely familiar with this book knows that it's pretty much a straight imitation of Tolkien. Most publishers decried such a shamelessly derivative work, but not Lester. When he read The Sword of Shannara, he recognized it for what it really was, minor details aside. A relatively well-told Tolkien ripoff. And unlike his more traditional-minded competitors in the industry, he didn't see a shameless knockoff. He saw dollar signs. The manuscript needed a lot of work, and among the many things Lester insisted that Brooks alter was any hint at the possibility of a science fiction element, as the story was meant to take place in the distant future of Earth after a nuclear apocalypse had decimated and then altered civilization, which, by the way, probably would have made The Sword of Shannara more of its own unique original work and less of an imitation. But no, said Lester, science fiction and fantasy must never mix. Never. The Del Reys...
Don't cross the streams. Ne'er doth the twain, whatever, should the two ever meet. But yeah, well, anyway, they had rules, but go ahead.
They lost. Okay, so eventually they lost their gatekeeping status, and now we have this. Is it better? Like, really?
They lost the what?
Their gatekeeping, their role as gatekeepers, and now we have.
Well, they don't care. They made their money, though.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, but also, they wouldn't have made money if there wasn't a market for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't expect people to only publish Tolkien, right? And people who have the same kind of innovative approach as Tolkien, right? Then we're going to be seeing a book once every 50 years, right? And he established this genre, and other people wanted more adventures in that genre.
Maybe. Yeah. I think that what I think they did was they saw that Lord of the Rings was popular. They presumed that no one could ever make anything else that was different from that and still be as popular. So they decided that what they would do is demand that everyone who wants to get work in, writing fiction, because they were the editors, and I think that made them into gatekeepers. They were saying, well, what you have to do is you have to try to make something like Lord of the Rings. And I think that she gets into this a little bit later to establish like what the formula is. It's in the next time code, with that they all had to follow. And I think what the Del Reys were doing, lesser Del Rey in this case, but I think that the other Del Rey had her own formula approach, was they were okay with oversaturating the market with similar stories and making a buck, and then just leaving the husk that was remains, because they didn't care about the culture itself. They just wanted, to essentially oversaturate the market with that. It reminds me of what happened with bear with me, okay, in gaming. All right. I think it's Activision. They bought the rights to Guitar Hero, which was a massive success, and it was very creative and very popular when it first came out. And it was put out by Harmonix. And then Activision, I think it was Activision, I'm pretty sure it was, they bought the rights to Guitar Hero, and then they released Guitar Hero games every 6 months. And they did it because they just wanted to, like, they basically was like, this is a fad, it's going to die off, we're going to make as much money as we can. And they just oversaturated the market with Guitar Hero games, made people pay full price for each installment, or at least close to it. And then when it actually did end up dying, they just like ignored it. They abandoned it after that. And I think this is like that, but it's like on a much larger scale, because it's like involving like everyone else's work. But it's a similar thing, right? Like they know, oh, this stuff's just a fad. We're gonna take advantage of it, and we're just gonna like run it through the ground. And unfortunately, they did this without a care for the creative process. That's what I think happened there. So,
oh, certainly. And maybe that's a general problem with the industry, or industries, period. This is like
I mean, some people would say that it's just giving people what they want, but the thing is, though, you have to remember that at one point in time there wasn't a Lord of the Rings, and so like you couldn't say that people wanted Lord of the Rings when there wasn't a Lord of the Rings, until there was one, and then they were like, oh, I love this, I want more of this. And so like
it didn't even start when it first started.
No, it did. Like, it took a while to get going.
A while to get going. Yeah.
So that's what I think the same. Like a lot of people say, like Hollywood right now, everything is sequels and reboots and remakes, and remasters or whatever. And they say it's because the consumers are dumb and they just want more of the same. But I don't think that's true. I think that the creativity is just not there. And it doesn't mean that there aren't people willing to do something, because I think that there's a lot of people who are very hungry to create stories, but they're not able to, because these gigantic studios that have all kinds of money to burn, and they're just spending on stuff that they find safe, because they think like, if I'm going to, let's just do another Alien series. Let's do another thing based on Predator. Let's do another thing based on Terminator, whatever. And the thing is that they forget is that at one point in history, there wasn't a Terminator movie. There wasn't an Alien movie. Somebody had to make that. And then sometimes it doesn't take off right away, and then it makes a cultural impact, and then we care about it for a while. But that doesn't mean that someone couldn't come up with something new. I know people could, right? It's just that we don't have those people creating things. So I think that's the same, because if you start believing that there will never be another Lord of the Rings, then we're basically cooked creatively. That means that we can't do it. And I just don't think that's true. I think there are plenty of people who are ready to make something, and they have ideas. And we just need to nurture that in them.
I think I'm just offending her with this flirt pole thing.
What?
Well, the cat's supposed to like play with it, and she's just like letting it fall into her face and then looking at me. Like, well, she's playing with it a little bit. I'm trying to get her to just chill out. Perhaps some.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing somebody pointed out. Like, look what happened to Star Wars. She mentioned Star Wars. It's nothing but a poor subversive copy of its old self, and that's simply because the people who are now the stewards of that intellectual property because that's the thing. Like it doesn't belong to you, but you are responsible for it. And if you are going to be responsible for something like this, then you have to love what it was. They're not able to. So instead, they just turn it into this subversive trash where they self-insert or they put their own like personal beliefs into it or their own value system into it without any regard for what it was actually about, without understanding where it came from. And that doesn't work. I mean, yes, there are some culture junkies that will watch anything you put in front of them, but that they're starting to die off. Like even they're waking up to this. So, okay. Anyway.
Intended to use this book and the subsequent franchise as the launching point for both their imprint, Del Rey Books, and their entire philosophy. Colleagues of the Del Reys stated that Brooks's Shannara book was like their baby, and Lester knew exactly what he was doing. Capitalizing on the overt Tolkien imitation, instead of advising Brooks to tone it down, Lester decided to lean into it. He even went as far as hiring the brothers Hildebrandt, who had done numerous iconic illustrations for The Lord of the Rings, to do the cover art for the Sword of Shannara. And the Del Rey's investment paid off. The Sword of Shannara was a major commercial success. It is generally regarded as the book that ushered in the modern age of commercially lucrative fantasy fiction. But
so it wasn't Lord of the Rings, it was Sword of Shannara. But even then it was like, so I don't think the original authors of the Sword of Shannara intended that to be the case. So
is Del Rey the only publishing house for
he was they were editors, but no, there was Random House and stuff like that, but they were kind of like I guess they were like the leaders in fantasy and science fiction. So
because the other thing is I wanted to point out, and this speaks to the title of our video, right? Okay, this is something that is across the board. Creativity has declined since like the 50s. I think it's the 50s, but definitely the 70s. The entire world that we exist within now is predicated on the theoretical foundation of one man, right? And what if the reason we don't have a Tolkien is the same reason why, since let me just give me a question. I'm going to get his name.
Who are you talking about? What did he write?
On digital communications. All right, so I just need to get his name. All right, because as soon as I get in front of a camera, my brain turns off. I'm sorry, guys. Cloud E. Shannon, right? And he wrote that. It's another thing that really didn't gain traction. He wrote it in, I believe, the 20s or the 30s. No, the 30s. He wrote Digital Circuit Design, which formed the foundation of the digital revolution. And he also wrote a paper on digital communication. And his work is, we exist within it, basically. Just like the entire fantasy genre, almost all of the fantasy genre exists within the tropes that Tolkien created. We exist within the concepts of Cloud Shannon. So all of our prosperity, all of our innovation, all of our technology comes back to the foundation he built. Now, what if we're not seeing a radical, although I am hearing an echo and I don't know why, what if we're not seeing that kind of a radically innovative mind for the same reason? Like the same reason we're not seeing it in fantasy or in science fiction is the same reason we're not seeing it now in technology. And I mean completely radical. In other words, Cloud Shannon is the foundation of not just one type of technology, but an entire industry, multiple industries of technology. Tolkien didn't just write a singular fantasy world. He wrote tropes that activated so many additional and further fantasy worlds that were based on the framework that he created. Maybe what's happening is there's some kind of current that's causing both types of men and both types of endeavor to disappear. And before I spoke at length about how Cloud Shannon, the reason why we might not have had another Cloud Shannon is because, is there a reason why we're getting an echo? It's really bugging the hell out of me.
Are you hearing yourself?
Yeah, I'm hearing myself. Why am I hearing myself?
I don't know.
Anyway, my thesis for why we don't have another Cloud Shannon and why creativity overall is declining, because she's talking about this, and this isn't just about writing. This isn't just about fantasy. It's not just about science fiction. Creativity is declining overall in every single field that you can identify. We are becoming less creative. We are not questioning these foundational ideas. We're not developing entirely new modes of thought or new genres. We're not doing that anymore. We're not as creative as we once were. And it's across the board. Now, she's focusing on one element of it, but when you step back and you see that this is something that's going everywhere, where is it coming from? And to be honest, it's, as far as I can tell, it's mainly men who create these foundational shifts in how we approach things. So where are they? Where did they go? Well, my going theory is we decided to basically attack masculinity, which is where a lot of this kind of risk-taking and thinking comes from. And we decided to attack masculinity because we didn't like the idea that girls didn't have access to everything. This is what I've seen. People don't want to identify anything unique, any unique value that men have as a result of masculinity, because that unique value might exclude women and girls from something. And they don't want to do that. Because we just know, right? That means we're basically stealing the last crust of bread from a starving girl's mouth if we do that. But that has led to overt attacks on masculinity in all the school at every level, from preschool to college. I mean, in the 90s, Christina Hoff Sommers, who wrote The War on Boys, details how boys or feminists started to influence the curriculum to teach boys, or presented this conjecture that the reason that boys behave in the way they do, in the kind of risk-taking, the kind of pushing boundaries that result in people who can result in great works like Shannon Cloud's thesis and papers on the digital like circuit design and communication, or Tolkien's innovative approach to storytelling and world building, that we are punishing the qualities that cause these things to emerge. We're basically stomping on the garden and punishing boys for the risk-taking, the boundary breaking, and all of that other. And I don't mean sexual boundary breaking. I mean like jumping the fence and going off into the woods to explore boundary breaking. We're punishing boys for that. And because of that, we're seeing an overt decline in creativity in our society across the board. Now, this is just one segment that she's talking about. So maybe the reason why we haven't had another Tolkien has nothing to do with the Del Reys, because I'm sure they would be happy to if another Tolkien emerged from the grassroots, which is where Tolkien emerged. Didn't emerge because a Del Rey, a prototypical Del Rey, picked him up and said, "Oh, hey, you are going to be our new wonderkind." He emerged from grassroots interest, from word of mouth, right? Maybe we don't have another Tolkien because we don't have another Tolkien. Just like we don't have another Cloud Shannon, because we have actively gone to war against the impulses and behaviors and the type of mind that creates that kind of large-scale risk-taking, aka masculinity, right? There you go. That's my thesis. I'm tying it back to the title. And we can continue to listen to what she has to say, but consider that the reason why we haven't had another Tolkien is because we haven't had another Tolkien. And had we had another Tolkien of another kind, the Del Reys would have been happy to exploit the storytelling, the world building, and whatever else this guy created for them to exploit. So maybe they're not to blame. Maybe something else is, and maybe that something else is to blame for a lot more than just the lack of truly innovative, epic fantasy storytelling. Okay, I shall get off my podium.
All right. Send us some super chats, guys, if you want to say anything or add anything to this. What?
Someone has sent a super chow.
I read Xerax's already.
Oh, okay. Well, let me poke the voles, and we do have a thank you to give.
All right.
Guys are not. I don't know. You guys aren't entertained today. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, it's not as quiet as it was on Monday. Monday was like depressingly quiet, but let's see.
I have to good. Go. Well, we are talking about something that I think has people.
Do you disagree?
Kind of animated.
Or you don't have to disagree, but do you have thoughts on what I just said?
No, I totally understand what you're saying, but it sort of like works in tandem with what I was saying, is that Tolkien was able to tell the stories because he didn't have. See, the thing is that we have prioritized safetyism and security to such an extent that no one is having experiences that can influence their creative process that add to that. And so they're the people who are writing are just writing sort of like raw desire, or it's derivative because they've been influenced by other people's writings or things that they've experienced, but that's all like through what they watch on their phone or their TV or whatever, right? So I think that it's because we're not having like actual adventures in real life that we're not writing adventures at home, or at least as well. So it's an excess of comfort and safetyism, which is like, where masculinity thrives, basically on the perimeter. And I think that doesn't mean that we're not going to get anything, because I'm sure there are people who are out there that are going to have something to say, but we're not going to see it as sort of normal or like as often as we used to.
Okay, so yeah, I want to thank Dark World Moon for putting in $250. Thank you, Dark World Moon. Yeah, so now we are at, let me just double check. We are at 1,295 left to go. So very much appreciated if you put something in. Please do. It gets a little bit hairy. I want to make sure that we're able to continue to do the meetups, because if we can't make our monthly fundraiser goal and do the meetups, then one or the other, and it can't be the continuing to do the show. So please go to feedthebadger.com/justthetip. No, feedthebadger.com/support. That's feedthebadger.com/support. $5, $10, every bit helps. I hope that I clearly explained the connection between the title and what we're talking about, at least the way I see it. Okay, so, and I would honestly say that it's not all women. It's the women who seek moral dominance. It is a situation where women's sexuality isn't kept under the same wraps as men, so entire genres can end up being devoted to fetish content for women, and nobody bats an eye or says this is not actually artistic, this is not literature. But but you could also see it as the same dynamic. The Del Reys exploited people's desire for Tolkien-esque literature. They created derivatives that supposedly didn't have much of their own merit or weren't very innovative, and now we're doing the same thing because people want to make money. They're going to the lowest common denominator. And people who are just interested in the porn content of literature don't care about grammar. They don't care about editing. They don't care about continuity. They don't care about character. They just want their trigger points to arousal, I guess. So they don't actually like to appeal to this crowd. The literature, the publishing industry doesn't actually have to do much effort. They don't have to edit it. People are not gonna. Do you think they're really gonna care about proper grammar when this is just smut to get off to? Do people care about it? Do people care about characterization in porn movies? No. So it's like they can completely remove entire branches of quality control and thus having to pay for this content. And they get content that's got vast appeal for many, many, many women. and they'll spend money for it. Like it's basically the same kind of thing, except I would argue that whatever the Del Reys were putting out, it probably had more merit than Morning Glory Milking Farm or Dangerous Crow Boy Sparkling Plastic Eater, which is the newest thing. Like, it just this is porn categories in written form. Well, porn categories were always in written form. Porn categories with extra steps. Right, that's it. That's all that this modern literature really has become. Porn categories with extra steps. So it's like, and it, again, it could be the same thing driving it, just money, and a collusion between money and the fact that we don't tell women no when it comes to their sexuality. Like, no, you don't get to have this in public libraries. No, you don't get to have this on bookshelves at Walmart. No, you don't get to take over entire genres with your porn categories, ladies. No, nobody sells women no, except here on this channel and maybe increasingly other places. But anyway, feedthebadger.com/support if you want to support telling women no, which is very ironic, I realize.
Say no by saying yes.
Okay,
let's get back to it.
Resolve the cognitive dissonance by listening to this lady.
Let's jump into the formula, but it's right here, so I jumped ahead to it already.
Lester was a savvy businessman. He couldn't just sit back and hope that a whole host of new writers would just deliver countless manuscripts to him that would meet the same exacting parameters established and tested by Terry Brooks' The Sword of Shannara. So he decided to be proactive. It was then that Lester Del Rey put together his own formula. This was the mandatory shape all fantasy books submitted to Del Rey must take. The books would be original novels set in invented worlds in which magic works. Each would have a male central character who triumphed over the forces of evil, usually associated with technical knowledge of some variety, by innate virtue, and with the help of a tutor or tutelary spirit. Other sources include added parameters such as the detail that the male lead character must always get the girl, but I had trouble verifying those sources completely. I've always wondered if this was what Lester Del Rey really believed was the core of Tolkien's work and therefore the reason for its success, this two-sentence hyper-specific formula, or if he simply pared down the simplest and most recognizable elements of Lord of the Rings and derived a straightforward formula within which he would still have a bit of room for variety.
So if he was boiling down Lord of the Rings to that, I think he was more so looking at the Sword of Shannara, though, right? So I don't know if the Sword of Shannara had this. But in Lord of the Rings, who's the main character? Is it Frodo? Is it Aragorn? Is it Sam? I mean,
Frodo.
If you look at it, huh?
Frodo is the main character. Like,
Frodo should be the main. Yeah, I mean, I think we're supposed to think Frodo's the main character, but he doesn't get the girl. He ends up being wounded in such a way that it changes him forever, and he goes to the West. Aragorn gets the girl, but he was kind of always going to get the girl, so that wasn't really in question.
Yeah.
Sam does get Rosie Cotton at the end, but there's no, like, it's one of those things where he sees her in the beginning and then he doesn't see her for any of the movies, and then at the end they're just married. I mean, I'm sure, like, coming back from, saving Middle Earth is gonna get you in good with Rosie Cotton, so he just be like, yeah, save the world. But
could you move your
it's
Frodo, mic a little bit?
He doesn't. So what?
Your mic is in your face. Your mic is covering your face.
Oh, the mic. Oh.
Yeah, okay. There you go. I'm sorry, I'm really spurgy about things like that. Okay. You're right. They looked at there are significant differences in Sword of Shannara versus Tolkien. Lord of the Rings is much more difficult in terms of a read and in terms of, like, I don't mean like, it's a more fraught look at human nature, I think. Because it's basic, and everybody's like, oh, it's got this black and white morality. No, it says that everybody is corruptible if they lose the ability to doubt themselves. if they start to believe that they have all of everything that needs to be understood and everything that they have the truth, right? And they are able to, they don't doubt themselves, so that they never question what they're doing or why. And that's the kind of corruption of the ring, is that, a good person gets the ring and they think they can use it to make the world better. But what ends up happening is the power corrupts them, because they cease to doubt that what they're doing is actually making the world better. And so the presentation is that anybody can be corrupted. And so we're following this character, and he is trying to prevent himself from being corrupted, and he eventually loses, and he ends up being corrupted. And this is like this message that the world is stronger than you. I mean, it's almost a depressing message. That's why I say it's a more difficult book, even though Frodo in the end was celebrated for having withstood the ring for as long as he did and getting it to the precipice of Mordor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like
still got to him, though.
Yeah, the ring still got to him in the end. That's what I was saying. It still tainted him. It
was even calling out to Sam a couple of times, but Sam he didn't have it in his possession as long.
Yeah.
And you know what? One thing that I was thinking about too, I don't know if people know this, but like, why they say the hobbits were highly resistant. Do you guys know why? Do you know why the hobbits were resistant? I have a theory. I mean, you could there's probably
modesty?
It's because of their innocence. I think that they're they were probably the most innocent race or whatever in the setting. So it would take a lot for them to become corrupted. That would be my guess. They lived the most simple life. They didn't need or want for a lot. So there wasn't the temptation just wasn't there as much, but eventually it gets to them too. That would be my thing, because Sam was even more innocent than Frodo was. So he was probably more resistant. I mean, my guess. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, but overall, that's a much more difficult storyline for people.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you question things, and you have to, and it really speaks to the corruption of war, and something about if you go to war, you will do things that are horrifying. Period. You'll see horrifying things, and then you'll have to do horrifying things. So there's no getting out of that corruption. And I think Tolkien was talking about that, and that how it impacts you forever. And there's no going back. There's no actual happy ending. There's no going back from something like this, but Frodo had to do it because it was for the best of everyone. And he's a true hero.
Well, he kind of got conscripted. See, this is what I mean by some of the stuff. There's definitely some allusions to Tolkien's actual experience. Frodo didn't want to have anything to do with the ring, but he got conscripted into this quest, and it was against his will. And Sam was conscripted along with him, by Gandalf. So they were doing something they didn't really want to do, and they ended up having to see it through all the way to the end. So.
Yes, but that's heroic, and it's knowing that whatever you do in the end, you're never going to be able to come back to what you were. And it's not going to be just, oh, you got these new powers, you got the girl, you have a dragon familiar, and you're awesome and cool. Frodo was destroyed by the task that he took on. He couldn't even live in Middle Earth anymore. He had to leave because of the wound he received, right? So. And he didn't even finish the task. That is quite the message to give people. And yet it's still hopeful, and in particular, it's hopeful because of Sam and what Sam did.
Sam was clutch.
The hope is in the fraternity between men seeking good. That's where the hope lies. It's not even in a single person. And of course, that is definitely a soldier's message.
I don't know if the sword of the other book. No,
it doesn't. It
doesn't do that. I don't know what it does. I've never read it.
Okay, it takes the trappings of Lord of the Rings, and it removes all of the moral, like the moral fraughtness, the difficulty, like contending, like short of Shannara, I doubt would ever find a real fan base among the counterculture or the college students, because it's not challenging in that way. They probably liked it because it was challenging, and back then, liberal weirdos actually could create interesting art, or even appreciate interesting art. But they liked it because it was challenging. But that's what is gone in Sword of Shannara. Like, as far as I can tell, as far as I can remember, it's just a rollicking good adventure. It actually probably takes more from Louis L'Amour's The Walking Drum or something. Like just a boy's adventure, except with a bit of sexuality, a lot of sexuality in terms of Walking Drum. Just it, and things are simple, black and white, and good triumphs. Did good really triumph in Lord of the Rings?
Did good triumph? Yes.
No, well, good triumphed, maybe, or evil just screwed itself, basically. Like good.
I mean, Gollum. It was Gollum and Frodo eventually. Yeah. Like, were the reason why the ring was destroyed. But like, I would say good definitely triumphed. It was like every moment in that story when things get their bleakest, there's like a tiny glimmer of something positive, but it's like enough to move the needle enough to like move it towards its ultimate goal. Like, and if you watch the movies, it does this all throughout, where you'll see like it'll be super dark, they can't see anything, and then Sam will be like, look, there's a star, and you'll see one star in the sky, and then it like disappears. Or like they're like moving through the forest and there's like a shattered statue and it's covered in like vines and stuff, and it looks all like decrepit and ruined, and then the sun shines through and you see that he's got like a crown of flowers on his head, and Sam points it out. It's like that, like that's kind of on the nose symbolism of like keep going, right? And that's kind of what that was like the message through it all, is that it's always darkest before the dawn kind of a thing. So and they do that all throughout. Like there's all like, oh, it's over, everything looks extremely bad, and then like suddenly there's a clutch moment and everything turns around, or at least they survive for a little bit longer. But that's kind of like that's kind of like that's what the theme is, I guess, or one of the themes. But anyway,
what I was trying to say is that good doesn't triumph in like this grand battle.
It doesn't come out unscathed, unharmed.
Or even in being able to fulfill its task. Good triumphs by continuing to stand up and keep going. It basically outlasts evil and wins, not because it directly defeats evil, but because it gets to the point where evil defeats itself. But if good hadn't kept going, evil wouldn't have driven evil to the point where it defeats itself. And again, evil is not something outside of yourself in Tolkien. See, evil is something within everyone that can be succumbed to. So there's no black and white. If anything, there's only gray and there's only black and resisting the black, or dark gray and resisting it. Right? And there's only behavior. That message has to come through if the central character ended up being tainted, or ended up succumbing to the evil.
Yeah.
And yet he survived long enough, and he, through the support of his friend, kept going long enough that he got it to the point where evil destroyed itself, like evil screwed itself over. I think that was the ultimate message. And yes, it is about seeing the hope even in the most dire of circumstances, which I imagine that Tolkien had experienced quite a bit of, and seeing the hope in the camaraderie and the support of your fellow soldiers. That's definitely there. But I think you can't deny that in Lord of the Rings, good never triumphed through some heroic effort. It triumphed through endurance until the point at which evil destroyed itself. Right. That's not the same message as I think Sword of Shannara. Although somebody's saying
there's truth to it, and it is a Christian message too. Is that like the world is evil, like there is evil in the world, and you can't ever really be rid of it. You have to constantly. It's a lifetime fight, basically.
Yes. And Slithering Peanut says the main issue with a lot of Shannara books, but especially Sword, is the main character is a passive observer. Shia Almsford is the prime example. He's protected and shielded by others until something. I don't know. I didn't see the rest of it.
Characters. Let me see if
it's ran out of characters. No, it doesn't look like you put in there.
I never read those books, but yeah, that doesn't sound. But again, this is because that book did well, and maybe there were people that just wanted more fantasy and they were willing to take whatever. I'm not that I think those books are probably fine. They're just
they're probably fine. But I think there's a misinterpretation in what the Del Reys are doing here.
Yeah,
I think that Sword of Shannara, again, yes, it has superficial Tolkien trappings, but I think it removes the stuff that makes Tolkien the difficult. Like a difficult, so it's much more clear good and evil, much more clear triumph of good through heroic action and that kind of thing. And so basically Del Rey looked at Tolkien and looked at Sword of Shannara, and they saw how retaining some things and then shaping it out around a more of a boy's adventure kind of plot or characterization would make something very popular. And I honestly, I don't agree with her. I think it's perfectly fine to have boys' adventure. Like that's basically what it sounds like Sword of Shannara became. It became Tolkien trappings, boys' adventure type plot characterization and themes. That means that Del Rey,
I don't even think she kind of was like she said it was a pretty good book, but she did say it was basically a copy of Lord of the Rings. I don't know. I think you're right. I mean, I haven't read those books. It's probably not true, but
not if it didn't if it doesn't copy the essential heart of the story, then it's not a copy. Right? It's just basically taking Lord of the Rings and making it a boy's adventure. That's different. That is not Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings isn't just elves and swords and mythic adventures, because if you're going to say that, there were writers writing those things before Tolkien that Tolkien took from, right? You can look at, let's look at previous writers. All right. So let's see if I can find that.
Before Tolkien?
Before Tolkien. Okay. Just a second. All right. So first one, these are some. All right. Whoops. Okay. Where did it go?
Lewis Carroll.
Lewis Carroll, yes, Lewis Carroll was prior to Lord of the Rings. I'm trying to find my little thing that I got. I did an analysis of. Okay, The King of Elfland's Daughter by Lord Dunsay, 1924. A nameless fantasy realm where the mortal land of Earl borders the magical Elfland, a shimmering, timeless world of fairy ruled by the King of Elfland. It's steeped in dreamlike, mythic qualities and enchanted forests, unicorns, and sifting realities. The men of Earl, craving marvels, send Ulfric, son of their lord, to marry Lizarel, the King of Elfland's daughter. Seeing some parallels? Armed with a magic sword, Alfred woos her, but their marriage falters as Lizarel struggles with mortal life. Their son, Orion, grows up caught between worlds, hunting unicorn. Okay. So Dunzel's lyrical prose and archetypal world influenced Tolkien's depiction of ethereal realms like Lothlorien. All right. So The Worm Ouroboros is another one by E.R. Edison, 1922. Mercury, a fantastical planet, not the real one, hosting the kingdoms of Demonland, Witchland, Goblinland, and others. It's a baroque, pseudo-medieval world of towering mountains, enchanted citadels, and heroic warfare, populated by human-like races with mythic undertones. Summary: the lords of Demonland, Jus, Gori, Goldri, Bluzgo, and Brandok Daha battle King Goris of Witchland after he demands their submission. The conflict spirals into epic quests, including Gorley's kidnapping to a magic mountain, rescues via hippogriff, and sorcery-driven betrayals. The narrative loops like the titular serpent as the heroes, victorious, wish for eternal conflict. It blends North Saga-style heroism with Renaissance flair. Okay, significance. Edison's richly detailed world, heroic tone, and invented nomenclature. prefigure Tolkien's epic scope. Tolkien admired the style, although he critiqued its amorality. Okay, The Wood Beyond the World by William Morris, a medieval-inspired fantasy land with enchanted forests, mystical cities, and realms like the Bearfolk's Savage Hills. The world feels proto-Middle Earth with a blend of chivalric romance and fairy tale magic, including a mysterious maiden and a malevolent queen. Golden Walter, a young merchant, flees a troubled marriage and sails to a strange land. He encounters a beautiful maiden enslaved by a sorceress queen and her consort, the king's son. Walter and the maiden navigate treachery, magic, and wilderness to escape, ultimately finding love and a new kingdom. The story is a quest-driven romance with lush, archaic prose. Okay, and then The Well at World's End by William Morris. Ralph, youngest son of the king of Upmead, seeks adventure in the fabled Well of the World's End, rumored to grant immortality. He encounters Lady Ursula, faces trials, bandits, tyrants, and a seductive queen, and navigates a war-torn land. Their quest for the Well blends romance, heroism, exploration, ending in personal fulfillment over power. Fantasies by George MacDonald. Anodos, a young man enters fairyland on his 21st birthday. His journey is a surreal odyssey through enchanted landscapes. Ooh, this is Isekai. Isekai. Facing dangers, pursuing an elusive marble lady, and grappling with his own flaws. The narrative, rich in symbolism, explores spiritual growth and redemption, ending with Anodos' return to the mortal world. Significance. MacDonald's dreamlike world influenced Tolkien's portrayal of mystical places. For example, Mirkwood. Okay, so C.S. Lewis cited fantasies as a key inspiration. The Princess and the Goblin. Princess Irene, aged 8, discovers a magical thread from her great-grandmother who leads her to rescue Curdy, a miner's son from goblins plotting to flood the castle. Curdy's bravery and Irene's faith thwart the Goblin King and Queen. The story blends adventure with moral lessons set in a proto-fantasy world.
Actually, I think The Princess and the Goblin was animated at one point back in the day. That's really familiar to me, The Princess and the Goblin.
Yes, probably was. But when you read all of this, these tropes pre-exist Tolkien, right? Sword of Shannara draws as much from this as Tolkien. And I would argue the thing that Tolkien makes or creates that's different is, again, that heart, that moral heart of his story, which is this kind of depiction of evil as being able to seduce anyone. And that, I mean, it's just fraught. It's just something that gives you shivers, the entire story of Frodo, and how little he got from the burdens he bore. Right. And how much he sacrificed for them, and the fact that he ultimately didn't win. I mean, this is a story. This is like something that's just really like it kicks you in the gut, and that is what I think that Tolkien truly did differently. So, Sword of Shannara isn't that. It sounds like some of these trappings wrapped around a boy's adventure. And a lot of those trappings, they may look like they come from Tolkien, but they equally could have come from these pre-existing fantasy stories.
Well, Tolkien didn't create the blueprint. But I don't think that, I think this woman would agree with you, though, because what she's saying is that today, if you ask people like George R.R. Martin, these are big writers, or Michael Moorcock, about the fantasy genre, they will credit Tolkien as having created it. And she's saying that's not true. But then she goes into Del Reys, who basically created because the Del Reys believed that Sword of Shannara was a ripoff of Tolkien, which she agrees with, I guess, in terms of like having all the trappings of the surface level things. But I don't think that she thinks that there was nothing before Tolkien. I think that the Del Reys were acting as business people on the popularity of Lord of the Rings, and then the subsequent popularity of the Sword of Shannara for being similar to Lord of the Rings, at least on the surface. And I think that the Del Reys, from what I can tell, because I looked into their background a bit, they're not Christians. They are probably atheists. And so they don't see the deeper themes like running through it, or they didn't at the time. They just saw like the surface level things like magic and dwarves and men and, you know, probably orcs or whatever, dragons. And they were like, oh, this is the same thing, without like looking deeper. And I don't know if the person who wrote Sword of Shannara also had, you know, maybe like similar religious views, or they were sympathetic to that or whatever, but it sort of doesn't matter. I think that without that element in it, you're going to miss what Tolkien was saying. Also, the Del Rey's probably never been to war. So there's like, you know, there's a lot of stuff that they didn't see at all, because remember, they emerged in the 1960s. So this was like well after that, and they probably didn't fight in any wars. I don't know for sure, but I looked into it, and from what I can tell, there isn't a lot of information out there. So, but
okay, so Slithering Peanut, I've just put the list in Ask Allison in our Discord. So I hope you're in the Discord. I don't know how else to get it to you, because it's going to be way too big to put in a comment.
Well, you can get into the Discord for free by going to feedthebadger.com. What is it? BadgerNation.online.
BadgerNation.online. Yeah. The Slithering Peanut says this woman would not agree. She already assumed that Shannara was a direct copy. Yeah, I like what I'm basically arguing. Yes, she says that there's stuff before Tolkien, and I'm arguing that Shannara may have been inspired by that stuff, or even maybe it did take Tolkien's trappings directly. But what makes Tolkien's work, Lord of the Rings, separate from that category is the central story of a man with a problem, which is Frodo. And, you know, it's the world's problem, but he takes on that problem and tries to fix it. That central story is what Tolkien added, and it's what makes it so powerful. Other people have done the world building, the elves, the dwarves, everything else, right? That's a lot of Norse mythology, you know.
Yeah.
But Tolkien created that emotional, that conflict that resonated with so many people. And so what I'm saying is, even if this guy took the trappings, this isn't a Tolkien ripoff, because he's leaving the story. He's leaving that essential man with the conflict and the type of conflict. Instead, he's focusing on Aragorn, or in the other one, what was the first one that was mentioned, which was no. He's not focusing, like Sword of Shannara isn't focusing on Frodo. He's choosing Aragorn, which is the same as Ulfric in The King Elfland's Daughter, or similar to that character. It seems like the story seems to be similar. Or even Ulfric's son, Orion, who is part elf. And that is from The King of Elfland's Daughter, right? So, I mean, he's choosing that to focus on. Like, he's completely shifted the protagonist, because that protagonist is easier to cast in a boy's adventure. And ultimately, if you're going to have a problem with that, you're going to have a problem with an entire genre built for boys to enjoy, or young men to enjoy. And, you know, I know that Tolkien had these really deep themes which made him so unique, and deep emotional story. But I can't say that, you know, they took some of the stuff, turned it into a boy's adventure, and then sold a hell of a lot to boys and young men because they enjoyed it so much. I can't have a problem with that. And also, I don't think that stopped another Tolkien from emerging, because Tolkien didn't emerge because a bunch of Del Reys said, hey, oh yeah, this is the next big thing. He emerged grassroots by appealing to people who really wanted to read a story about morality framed in that way. Okay? So, yeah. I mean, I think that pretty much is me disagreeing with the entirety of her thesis. I think she needs to look bigger and consider that there's a lot more areas in which we don't have a Tolkien or a Cloud Shannon. Like, we're missing these creatives. And look at bigger dynamics for this to explain this, is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
And also, I don't think capitalism is to blame.
No, I don't think so either. All right.
So, I mean, you can agree if you want. Like, that's with her if you want. That's my opinion on what she said.
No, I don't. Yeah, I agree. Let's get, so, you know, she lays out the formula. We should, because I got a patron show I got to do. Yeah. So here's the counter formula, which is basically the reaction to the formula.
Del Rey formula. This, then, a literary world saturated with Del Rey's factory-produced Tolkien knockoffs, and those paperbacks mass-produced by Del Rey's imitators, was the world in which the second actor in our drama opened his eyes. Enter Michael Moorcock. I want to mention, there were a lot of writers who came to react negatively to the proliferation of the Del Rey's philosophy. The main reason I've singled out Michael Moorcock is because he is often styled the anti-Tolkien, and he was particularly vociferous about his dislike of what he deemed Tolkien-esque speculative fiction. He was also very influential. Many other writers took their cues from him. Now, this video is not concerned with Moorcock's work as a writer, but rather with his more influential role as an editor and generally a tastemaker in the world of speculative fiction. In 1964, Moorcock became the editor of New Worlds, where he would remain, besides a brief 5-year absence from 71 to 76, until 1996. It was here, within the pages of New Worlds, that Moorcock would champion what he deemed a counterculture revolution against this world that had been, by and large, created by the Del Reys. His very first essay for New Worlds in 1964.
What?
Why does Moorcock take aim at Tolkien?
Instead of a Del Reys?
Yeah, here's the problem with this. And this is what's really annoying. Tolkien's work is not Sword of Shannara. He didn't focus on the same things as Sword of Shannara is. Sword of Shannara is Tolkien trappings, or trappings of this kind of Norse-based epic fantasy, which existed before Tolkien, placed in a kind of a boys' adventure type tone. Okay? And yes, I agree with her on one level. I find almost all epic fantasy to be boring as hell. I'm not the target audience. Okay? But then Michael Moorcock, instead of taking aim at this literary creation based on Sword of Shannara, which is, again, this kind of epic Norse-based mythological trappings with a boy's adventure on top, or stretched over a boy's adventure skeleton, he takes aim of that and says, I am defying Tolkien. Well, Tolkien never wrote that.
Well, the truth is, Allison, it's not even the fault of Sword of Shannara, the writers of that book. It's because Sword of Shannara was a big hit, and there's a claim that was inspired by Tolkien, but that doesn't really matter because all of the fantasy that followed that. So basically, it's like 2 levels removed from Tolkien. You have Tolkien, then you have Sword of Shannara, then you have all of the slop that the Del Reys printed, and that's what Michael Moorcock and the counter formula people are rebelling against, and they're calling it Tolkien, but it's not. It's this stuff that's 2 steps away from Tolkien. Not even the Sword of Shannara books. It's beyond that. It's like a copy of those. So, and they're making the counter formula to that. And I mean, that's why those books, I guess, are not going to be at the level of Tolkien, because they're not even at the level of Sword of Shannara. So, but anyway.
When he took over, heavily suggested that he intended to bring a new flavor to science fiction. Interesting as that may be, it doesn't really have anything to do with our topic. It wasn't until Moorcock published his essay Epic Pooh that he really made clear his thoughts on the publishing industry of his time. Now, there are a lot of people out there who have thoroughly addressed just how wildly nonsensical Moorcock's poorly written takedown of Tolkien really is. So much so, in my opinion, that I found myself wondering if the man had actually read Tolkien. But what struck me as particularly notable was that Moorcock, like George R.R. Martin, like so many other critics of fantasy literature at that time, assumed that this, which he loathed with every fiber of his being, was due solely to the influence of Lord of the Rings, as if Tolkien had personally, with his own hands, formed 1960s and 70s fantasy literature. And as I think I've made abundantly clear, Tolkien actually had nothing to do with it. The world of Western fantasy against which Moorcock railed so violently was not ruled by the influence of Tolkien, but by the influence of Lester Del Rey. Now, defending Tolkien's honor isn't really the purpose of this video, but I think it is worth mentioning that among many...
What?
Well, she pointed out exactly what I said.
Yeah, that's why I told you.
Tolkien.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, redheaded lady.
Let me go to, I'm going to jump ahead. I think we get the point of that.
Even now, many are becoming fatigued by this new game of
hope punk. The generational cycles of grimdark versus noble bright. Please stop making words up. I'm sorry. Grimdark only applies to Warhammer 40,000. That's it.
Of Thrones era of bleak, ultra-grim fantasy, and they are responding with a new cycle of subversion and contrarianism. As is the case with Catherine Addison in her horrible, The Goblin Emperor, which she herself admits was, at least in part, a counter-response to Game of Thrones.
It is a book that was quite deliberately trying to do several things that fantasy right now has not been doing, because so much of fantasy right now has been so influenced by George R.R. Martin. But it does mean that things have been very grim and bleak and pessimistic and cynical. So it is deliberately, it's not a utopia, but it is utopianist in that it is arguing that doing the right thing will win. That if you try your best to be ethical and compassionate, you will come out on top.
So, as the established fantasy genre evolved, one formula begat a predictable counter-formula, which begat a predictable counter-formula, and so on forever, leading us now in current year to peruse the shelves of our local Barnes & Noble and think, golly, this sure is pretty far removed from that, must be new and unique. Is it though? Is Game of Thrones progressive and intelligent just because it's so different from the Sword of Shannara? Does that really make one good and one bad? For that matter, how far removed really is this from this?
I don't know these books, but From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout and Dracula in Love, which just based on the title, I don't know. I'm kind of curious about that. That sounds like, I mean, this looks like an old book, so it's probably not like Anne Rice type shit, but okay. Anyway.
I'm gonna summary of that. I'm gonna get a summary of that. We'll take a look.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm sorry, but most stuff is going to be schlock, except now it's gotten even worse. Like she wasn't happy with the publishing industry then, and she's not happy with the publishing industry now. It actually invites the question, what would make her happy? Like this individual. Because I know I've actually gone over how she's not happy with the current, like nobody, I don't think anybody's happy with the current, well, the publishing industry is porn now. That's what it is. And it's because that's the lowest common denominator, and it requires the least amount of effort, quality control, and it doesn't cost anything. And people have an endless appetite for it. What a surprise. And they even have more of an appetite the more our relationships go to crap. But like what would make this individual happy? Right? Like people will write different stories of differing quality, and they're going to go
what makes her happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, this feels like she's railing against just the cycles of creativity. People are going to go this way and that way, and honestly,
she's saying that. No, I think what she's saying is she's talking about, first of all, the so-called cultural leaders. So not like anybody who's trying to write something, but the people that are considered to be like the leaders in, book writing, the George R.R. Martins and Michael Moorcock's of the world. Like these people who are doing, I mean, she doesn't mention J.K. Rowling at all. I don't know if that's on purpose or what. So, but it's maybe maybe J.K. Rowling is the exception, and that doesn't really get to the heart of what she's trying to say. But what's happened is she's basically saying that we took something that was like, great and standout, which is Tolkien's books. And because other people wanted to like get close to that, like they saw it as aspirational and they were like, oh, I want to make a work like that. And so you got Sword of Shannara, which I don't think was people being lazy or whatever. Maybe they were inspired by that. Maybe they read Lord of the Rings and they were inspired by it. And it just kind of like came out in their work. Like, well, I guess it looks a lot like that or whatever. But what happened was you got sort of cynical, business people and salespeople that were like, we're gonna take this and we're gonna turn it into a money making machine, and they did, and that became like everything. And then you got counterculture people that were also part of this establishment, of fantasy writing. And they're like, we're gonna do that, but we're gonna do the opposite of that. And then they started following a formula that they thought was original, but it was just an inverted version of the other formula. And then you got like people saying, well, this is also grimdark and I'm it's nihilistic and I want to do something different. And so they like go back to the way we used to tell stories, but they think it's new because they've been steeped in this darkness for so long. And she's saying that we should stop looking at this as a series of things to react to, where you're like, oh, I don't like, Lord of the Rings, so I'm going to do the opposite of Lord of the Rings, or I don't like Game of Thrones, so I'm going to do the opposite of Game of Thrones, or whatever, because you're not allowing yourself the space to like actually do something different, or like at least something that you think is authentic, which is the most important thing. And that's what she says, like, you should make something that is authentic and stop worrying about like whether or not you're doing this right, because that's the problem, is that there were these rules, like they were like, well, fantasy has to have these things, and they're like, well, why is that true? And it ended up limiting it, right? And she's saying that it's just become a derivative of a derivative of a derivative, even if it's inverting the characteristics, and it's actually become stagnant and stale. And she's saying that we need to like break out of that cycle, basically, of move, counter move, right? Because that's where it is right now. That's what I think she's saying.
Okay, fair enough. I'm sure, but that's really not like, the thing is that they're just do it. Like Tolkien.
Yeah, that's what she says at the end. But like we are looking at the state of things now, which she mentions here. I'm going to play this bit.
Mass-produced food makes people unhealthy. The same goes for mass-produced entertainment. We've entered an era when all Western entertainment is corporate formula slop. Yes, all of it. So, if even our fantasy literature can only be more mass-produced entertainment for the sake of entertainment, at some point we're going to reach a kind of Twinkie entertainment critical mass as a civilization, if we haven't already. Now, don't get me wrong. I think stories absolutely must be entertaining. I think it is a storyteller's obligation to entertain their audience. However, if entertainment is the publisher's only aim, then I think they've missed the point by a country mile. Also, I think allowing a bunch of corporate overlords to decide how it is that we are entertained is troubling. Additionally, there is a difference between following popular trends and adhering to an industry formula. One is organic and follows its own natural path and life cycle. The other is corporate and profit-driven. And the thing is, because that machine and that business model exists as the foundation of Western publishing, it's basically impossible for anything other than Twinkies to ever be published. And in the rare case that such a book is published, it's an absolutely Herculean task. Is it possible to save Western fantasy publishing? I don't know. Listen, nothing is stopping you from writing a great fantasy novel. Nothing is stopping you from ignoring what is or isn't part of the formula and just writing what you want to write. Whether or not you'll be able to publish it is another matter. But the fantasy publishing world, such as it is the world that Lester Del Rey built, and it's the one we live in. Maybe we can fight
not anymore.
In its formula engine. Maybe we can't. Maybe knowledge like this will lead some writers to despair and put down their pens forever. Maybe this knowledge is driving force enough to make that one person out there write the masterpiece that ends up on the shelf next to Lord of the Rings. Who knows?
Okay.
All right, I'll just stop it there. I think that's basically where she leaves it.
I agree and disagree. First of all, I hope she's not really putting her guns against entertainment, because that's not why everything is awful now. Because people are like, oh, let's entertain the audience. It's awful because the writers, these individuals, are buying into a moral landscape. I call it the intersectional ziggurat. And that turns their work not into entertaining an audience, but dominating the audience morally and trying to get the audience to conform to the static categories in the intersectional ziggurat. So you're on this level. These are the people below you. These are the people above you. You stay there. And it's like didactic, and it's not about entertainment. It's about education. And that is actually made it absolutely appallingly awful. Well, first of all, I don't believe in a static moral system with a caste structure. So automatically I'm like, yeah, no, I don't believe in the intersectional ziggurat. But also the aim has made it so every bit of craft, which is what makes things entertaining, is gone because it's not compatible with the mentality of the intersectional ziggurat. Like it's the intersectional ziggurat does not recognize people's moral evolution because people exist in static moral categories of oppressor and oppressed, right? It doesn't recognize the necessity of being entertaining over being didactic and showing people where they lie in the intersectional stack, right? So that's what's ruining storytelling, and it's being pushed by, yes, corporations, but not corporations who want things to be entertaining for the audience, corporations who want things to reflect virtues like diversity and oppressed theory, stuff like that. This is what's being pushed, and they flood the marketplace with their funding that has nothing to do with consumer dollars. Who the hell knows where it comes from? It probably comes from eventually the government, but it floods the market with funding these projects that are basically didactic, teaching us all our moral place on the intersectional ziggurat. That's why it's crap today. Like the Del Reys seeking money is almost quaint. It's like, oh, we want to make a buck by entertaining the audience. Okay, I'm not going to get upset over that. I'm not going to get upset over the fact that they took Tolkien trappings and pulled it over the skeleton as a skin over the skeleton of a boy's adventure story. I'm not going to get upset over that. People were entertained, and that is categorically different than what's happening now. It's either didactic, moralizing, and it's a set of morals that is incompatible with character arcs, with humor, with people learning things from each other, unless you're an oppressor checking your privilege, and you're the oppressed learning how much has been taken from you, or other crap like that. Then that's why the plots seem to be divorced from the actual character evolution, because they can't write character evolution. The intersectional ziggurat is like a freaking endless dumbing down of people's understanding of each other into the most simplistic dichotomy. And you can't write complex character interactions. You can't write complex character evolution or even simple character evolution, because it all is subsumed into the intersectional ziggurat. I should draw this stuff out someday and do it standalone to explain it. But anyway, you can't do it. Their morality is incompatible with the craft necessary to make good stories. That's probably another reason why Tolkien.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, I think they need something a little bit higher to aim for than the intersectional religion.
Yes,
and to apply something more, let's say, transcendent in their thinking. This might be the reason why Tolkien was successful where so many others failed, and C.S. Lewis for that matter, because the Chronicles of Narnia is still a big deal. The other thing I would say about the Del Reys is that the problem was not that they were greedy or seek profit above all else. The problem was that they were risk averse. Because of that, they wanted to play it safe, and they were concerned with safety, which stifles creativity. So, that's pretty simple the way I see it.
Exactly. We probably, and in terms of what I'm saying, it's incompatible with character arcs, because in order to write character arcs, you have to, as a writer, you have to be willing to understand people who disagree with you or who are genuinely different than you, and not in a check your privilege way, but extend yourself to understand how people think who are not you. And if you know anything about intersectionality, everybody who disagrees with you is actually an immoral demon who deserves to be politically executed. This is they don't think. I said,
yes.
They don't regard people who disagree with them as legitimate. So they have no tools to really model someone else. I mean, in fact, they did. they'd probably be socially ostracized by their fellow travelers. So it's like it's an endless, stupefying, stultifying, and you're right, it's risk adverse, and it's also very dumb, and it does not lend itself to good craft. And I don't like I said, I think the Del Reys are the least of it at this point, the least of it. And I don't think you can blame them for not having another Tolkien.
Their whole framework could have been abandoned a long time ago, but instead everyone operated within it. So that's why we're in the place we're in now, because people are still referencing it through that paradigm, and all they got to do is escape the paradigm, just walk away.
Yeah,
and they could like write things again. So, but I got to do a
traditionally published. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right.
I got to do a Patreon show. This has gone longer than I expected, but I will ask this though, because I was talking to, maybe I'll do this in the Patreon show. We'll talk about this. I was thinking about like what books could also really make for good film or TV adaptations that are fantasy, that like, just like, don't say anything now, but I want you guys to think about it. Like, what's a fantasy book that you're like, and look, not with current year Hollywood, I mean like when they, because we got like all kinds of new people, like young, hungry people that want to make movies, they want to make shows, they want to make video games, whatever. And they need material. And I think that there's a lot of old material that's very rich and, could create a brand new sort of interest in these things. What are some that you thought about? I would like to see the Icewind Dale trilogy or the Dragonlance books adapted, for example. I think that could be really cool. But just let me know what you guys think in the comments. So do we have any more thank yous to give?
Oh yeah, we do. Richard Bier put in $500. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
That means we are at, actually this is a very heavy month. So thank you for doing a lot of the heavy lifting, everybody who did. Big thanks to Richard, and big thanks to OKFS for $250. And I think we are, well, that was before the show. Dark World Moon. Thank you for Dark World Moon for $250. And I believe that would put us at about 895, I think, about there. 895 left to go. Hopefully we make it. It's got a little bit of time left on the clock. If anybody wants to put in some more on, in at the last moment, that would be great. And feedthebadger.com/support to do so. And again, maybe I will just do a standalone that just explains the intersectional ziggurat and how it destroys creativity in writing. That might be interesting for people, because I think they're the people who are there, like the people in the writing sphere that aren't wrapped around woke so tightly that they're sucking their own whatevers. I think they're noticing that something is really wrong. But they haven't quite got to the point to realize what it is, where the stink is coming from. So maybe I'll do it at some point in the future. Feedthebadger.com/support to help us continue to create this content. And I think feedthebadger.com/justthetip if you want to actually send us a message with a tip, and badgernation.online if you want to join us in the Badger Discord. I'll do one last check, and then I'm going to hand it back to you, Brian, to take us out. One last poke of the bowls. I don't see anything, so back to you, Brian.
Okay, well, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we talked about on the show today, and please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of Maintaining Frame, which probably should have been Red Pill Cinema, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude, okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.